Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Pollard. I am the project officer for ERIC in the U.S. Department of Education. I'm here with my colleague, Fern Frusty, the collection development lead for ERIC, and we are here to talk to you about some exciting developments for our selection policy that governs the materials in ERIC. We're going to present some major updates to you, and then we have a call to ask you for your feedback. So now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Fern.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. ERIC periodically reviews the selection policy to identify sections that may need updating. During this webinar, we'll provide background on the selection policy last updated in May of 2022, and then walk you through the key changes proposed this year. These include the impact of the U.S. Department of Education's new public access policies on ERIC, the establishment of a schedule to routinely re-review all selected sources under agreement, an update to our approach to the inclusion of international content, and proposed changes to what content from individuals will be accepted via the online submission system going forward. We invite you to consider what we discussed today, review the draft updated selection policy available in the notes section of the ERIC website, then please provide your feedback to ERIC by March 11th. The purpose of the selection policy is to be transparent about the factors considered when journal and non-journal sources are selected for regular cataloging in the ERIC collection. By having the written policy, we seek to clearly communicate our policies to everyone. The selection policy provides a roadmap to ensure fairness and consistency with the review and selection of sources and the individual items, with high quality, rigorous, and relevant research. Periodically, ERIC reviews the selection policy to make updates to align with current practices and the vision for the collection. This year, the updated set of goals is in response to what we have noticed with the current sources and reflects a revised vision for the collection in the upcoming years. Now, Erin will discuss the impact of the revised policy access to ERIC.
Thanks, Fern. So we're going to begin by talking about some really exciting changes that we are going to be making to help the Department of Education comply with new federal public access policies. So in August 2022, Director Nelson of the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House wrote a memo to agencies called Ensuring Free, Immediate, and Equitable Access to Federally Funded Research. This memo updated the previous memo to agencies that was referred to as a Holder memo that set out the first generation of public access policies. So when I talk about changes to public access, I want to be clear that these only impact journal articles or non-journal publications that were funded by U.S. Department of Education federal funding. So this is a decent percentage of ERIC's content, but it is not the majority of it. So we are only talking about that work funded by the U.S. Department of Education. So this policy has several new changes that include immediate access to research, full text displayed as website text, increased metadata, and immediate access to the underlying data that a study is based on. So I mentioned that we are going to get immediate access to education research. And so the current ED public access policy, like all other federal public access policies, require authors to submit their work to ERIC immediately upon acceptance. ERIC then releases the record to the public immediately, but it holds the full text until 12 months after publication. This is a bit complicated in practice, so I wanted to give an example of how this typically works. Again, this is an example. The exact time frames may be off a little bit. So let's say an author writes an article that is accepted into a journal. The publisher posts the article as an online first article on their website, and the grantee submits the document to ERIC. ERIC will then publish a record with a citation of the article. This typically happens a month or two after the online submission was submitted to ERIC, about a month or two after the online first goes on the publisher's website. Somewhere between 6 and 18 months later, the publisher publishes the article. If that journal is indexed in ERIC, ERIC will receive the metadata for the article from the publisher and will publish a version of, will publish the journal version of that record in ERIC. The publication point starts the official clock of that 12-month embargo for the public access article. So 12 months after the official journal version is published, ERIC can release the full text of the public access submission to the public. So what we typically see is that can be a 2.5 to 3 year gap from when the articles are first published as online first to when ERIC is able to make the full text available to the public. So again, one thing to note is that this is just a typical process, but it is not the only process. For example, ERIC currently has agreements with 700 journals where the publisher deposits on the awardee's behalf. Some publishers have agreed to display the full text sooner than 12 months, but even for the journals that allow ERIC to display with no embargo, there's often a delay due to the online first process or delays in sending the content to ERIC. So let's look at what the new public access plan looks like. Under this plan, research will come out a lot sooner. At the same time that the article is published as an online first article, the awardee will be submitting the work to ERIC. By the same time, we mean within the same week. We expect this to happen quickly. ERIC will then create the record and it will appear on the ERIC website within a month of the article being online first. The full text will be available immediately. That is within a month of it being available on the publisher's website. The publisher will then eventually formally publish the article, let's say 15 months later. If ERIC indexes a journal, we will update the original ERIC submission to reflect the official citation and update any metadata. There are two important changes happening here. Users will get access to taxpayer-funded research much quicker, in several cases, years sooner. Second, the record will be streamlined. Instead of having one record as a grantee submission and another record as the journal's record for many articles, there will just be the journal version. The record will be updated at least once, so those using the ERIC data on their websites or their platforms will need to plan to regularly refresh the data. What is also changing is the format that we will be showing awardee records in. Right now, ERIC is a PDF-based system, or mostly PDFs. Everything in ERIC, any newly created record in ERIC must correlate to a PDF. We don't index content in other formats. Going forward, awardee content will be displayed as website text. This will look like HTML, just like what you see on many commercial publishers' website. Here's an example of what this looks like on Sage's website. We expect that our display would be similar. So this leads to a few questions. Will we be doing this for non-grantee content or non-awardee? The answer here is no, at least not right now. While ERIC has historically been on the forefront of sharing our research in the newest formats, it is very expensive to create this content. We are going to prioritize building the tools to do this with our awardee content first, and then we'll think about expanding it down the road once we get the kinks worked out. Second, what format will we be using? We plan to use JATS and BITS formats. These are the industry standards, and we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to use what is currently standard. Third, who is going to be creating the XML for awardees? And the answer to that is ERIC will be, at least for now. Lastly, what about PDFs? And so the answer here is a bit complicated. We know our key users, like teachers, love PDFs. They find it easier to download and mark up a document or even print it and hand it to colleagues. We will continue to use PDFs and to display them on our website if awardees submit them. But we also know that XML and website text is the future. We want to allow bulk downloading of our content for researchers to be able to use this research for machine learning and other innovative technologies. So while we're paving the way for the future by providing XML, HTML content, we want to continue to do what we have in the past. So you're going to see both formats available on our site. So in addition to the new formats, we're going to be really increasing the amount of metadata available on the ERIC record. Under the new public access policy, our awardees will need to have ORCID IDs and information about their author affiliation. There will be DOI permalinks to the publisher's version of record for the article, and there will also be increased linkages to information about the awards. What I find most exciting is that once the article is available, the researchers must make their underlying data publicly available unless prohibited by law. What is really exciting about this is that this will mean that researchers will be able to reproduce the findings and contribute to general good government principles. There will be a lot more data available that researchers can use for secondary analyses, reducing burden on schools. We have seen in other fields, such as astronomy, that researchers can accomplish amazing things by sharing their data and collaborating, and we're excited to bring this to education. However, the key phrase I said earlier, was unless prohibited under law. Most of what the Department of Education funds involves humans, specifically small humans who are considered vulnerable subjects. There are lots of laws prohibiting data sharing around children. We want to protect our research subjects' privacy. And this means that users can expect to see a lot of data management plans with information about how to obtain the data and restricted use files, but probably less fully open data sets than what you would see in other fields. All right, so next, how is this going to work? Here's what we are proposing. Awardees are going to be submitting a package to ERIC to create the XML, or that full text of the article and website text. This package will have the full text of the article, any underlying data or figures, alternative text or images, a 5-way compliant PDF if they have it, and the metadata needed to create the ERIC record. ERIC will then create that full text file within 30 days. So, as I said earlier, the record in ERIC should be available less than a month from when it is made available on a publisher's website. Once the record is published, ERIC will have a process to submit a request to update the record if needed. So this could be to add additional metadata that ERIC does not need for the record, but is needed for compliance with the public access policy. For example, this could be an ORCID ID, a link to the data set, or updated citation information. Okay, so lastly, we anticipate getting questions asking, can a publisher submit on behalf of the awardee, just like they do for other federal agencies? The answer to this is a big yes, but also a big but. So in order for us to set up a process like this, we would need a publisher to submit the XML file and all associated metadata in an appropriate format within 5 days of the article being publicly accessible. This is typically before the article is officially published. Currently, no publisher submits the content before publication because it lacks complete metadata. This is a huge shift and one that we aren't sure commercial publishers are going to be interested in making. So while we do not expect that many publishers will be able or willing to meet our requirements, so this means that we expect most awardees will need to be submitting their manuscripts to ERIC. So now I'm going to pass this off to Fern, who's going to talk to us about our process of re-reviewing content.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Another key update to the selection policy is that we've created a plan to systematically re-review all the sources under agreement. Part of ERIC's focus for the last few years has been on increasing the number of sources cataloged in the collection. We've determined now that the collection doesn't need to grow further, although it could, but we will instead seek to understand the topical coverage and the geographic balance we're providing in the current collection. We conduct a review now of new sources twice a year, and during the same time identify sources under agreement that should be re-reviewed. Historically, we presumed that once a journal was selected, it would continue to publish content that meets the selection standard and criteria and publishes at the same rate. We've re-reviewed those that have had a drop in the percentage of education research or have ceased, closed, or journals that have moved to a new publisher, and may determine that they should no longer be cataloged in ERIC. However, we have not conducted a re-review of every source in ERIC since 2014 and feel it is a good practice to do so periodically going forward. This will help manage some of the changes we have seen in our content, as well as the coverage of education topic areas in ERIC. For example, in the past few years, we've seen a dramatic change in some of our sources, such as the inclusion of some articles that do not fall within the journal's stated aim and scope, or a drop in the quality of English full text or abstract. In some cases, the volume of content published by our approved sources has increased, with several journals publishing far more content than when they were originally selected to be included. An increase in published work in the education sciences is a good thing. However, ERIC wants to be fair and will establish a plan to routinely re-review all sources with the updated collection goals in mind. This curation of the collection means that ERIC may include a source for a period of time and then stop as a result of the re-review. This may be to better meet collection goals or some other reason arises, such as the decision to change the size of the collection, perhaps balance the geographic distribution or sources by topic area, or if we've located a different international journal that includes a higher number of articles related to U.S. education. To be fair, we will set up a system to regularly re-review all current sources in addition to the review of new sources. The current sources will fall under one of two categories. Any new source will be re-reviewed again 3 years after the agreement is signed. Then following, all sources will be re-reviewed every 5 years. Also, we'll take a look at the source again automatically when a source is acquired by a new publisher after a few issues are available. If selected to continue, a new agreement must be established with the new publisher. But it's also possible that a re-review may happen at any time for situations such as a change in scope, the source name changes, current content is not being provided to ERIC, or there is a dramatic increase in published content. We really expect this process to happen behind the scenes. Publishers and editors do not need to do anything. This is just going to be a routine review system that is being set up to be systematic, fair, and objective. We are not seeking any major changes to the collection and expect that most sources, once they are selected for cataloging in ERIC, will not hear from us again as a result of a re-review.
Thanks, Fern. Now what we want to do is shift our focus to rethinking how we are approaching international content. So to set the stage, ERIC was historically founded to share education research across the United States. And you can see here, we have a huge international reach. The majority of our users today are outside of the United States and are from every country in the world. We love our international usage. As we begin the discussion, I want to be clear that ERIC will continue to be available for our international audience. Our website and metadata will continue to be free and open to use. We want to encourage international users to keep using ERIC. This is a shift in our content, not our audience. So, ERIC has a long history of cataloging international journals. We sought out international content so that we could learn from educators around the world. These journals are high quality and meet ERIC selection policy. They have a tremendous value to the ERIC collection. Our users can learn so much by learning how other countries approach similar problems. However, a tension that we are grappling with is that we have seen a dramatic increase in the quantity of content that meets ERIC's selection policy. There's simply more high-quality education research being published than what we can afford to index. As we are prioritizing sources, we need to look at our mission. That is, because ERIC is funded by the Institute of Education Sciences, we are a program that is run by the U.S. Department of Education. Our mission at IES is to provide scientific evidence on which to ground education policy and practice, and to share this information in formats that are useful and accessible to educators, parents, policymakers, researchers, and the public across the United States. That is, our mission has been to help the students and educators within the United States. This is not a new mission. This is the same priority that we have had for ERIC since our start in the 1960s, before the U.S. Department of Education was even formed. Our core roots are to make sure that we are prioritizing the needs of our core users. So as we have to think about what sources we may need to cut due to a lack of space, we are looking at some international journals to make sure that they are fitting that need of our core users as part of our mission. So now I'm going to pass this on to Fern to talk about specifically what we are proposing.
Thank you, Erin. For the first time, the ERIC selection policy is going to include a section about ERIC's approach to selecting international sources going forward. As we determine how to prioritize content, we will focus on our primary mission to include international sources that are directly relevant to educators in the United States. We will give priority to international sources where the research participants are in the United States or in an OECD member country where English is the primary or most used language. This will include sources from Australia, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. All sources will go through the regular review process and must meet ERIC's standard and all criteria for selection. We plan to invite all sources from these countries that meet our selection standards to be cataloged in ERIC. Additionally, ERIC will review sources from outside of the OECD countries if there is a high level of articles with direct relevance to the work of education in the United States, its territories and freely associated states, and military bases overseas. We are looking for journals containing articles that include U.S. participants, or the object of the research is to compare education outside of the U.S. to education in the U.S. There are two examples on this slide. If a publisher in the Netherlands publishes a journal on early education in the United States, or if a publisher from Japan publishes a journal on comparative education policy. For either of these examples, we would review the source, and if it meets ERIC's selection standard and criteria, it may be selected for cataloging in ERIC. In addition to sources published by the OECD member countries and other international sources containing content with direct relevance to the work of education in the U.S., ERIC will also select other international sources that primarily include education research on education outside of the U.S. This is to satisfy a collection need to provide geographic and topical diversity in the collection. This will be as our resources permit, which means that there may be international sources that meet ERIC standard and criteria, but are not selected because we simply have too many sources for that topic area or currently have sufficient coverage from that country for the topic area.
I want to jump in here to echo something that both Fern and I said earlier. We value our international journals, and we think that they produce really high quality education research. We expect the majority of journals to continue to be indexed. That said, we know that some international institutions use having articles published in ERIC as a criteria for promotion and tenure. We are flattered that inclusion in ERIC is seen as the bar, but the implication of this policy is that a source may be discontinued simply because there is no longer space in the collection. That means that high quality work will not be indexed through no fault of the faculty or editors. So if your institution has such a promotion policy, you may want to reconsider it. Okay, back to Fern.
Great, thank you. Our last item today is to outline a change for online submission. We previously talked about individual awardee submissions to ERIC. In addition, ERIC will accept other individual materials through the online submission system. The original intent of the online submission system was to receive conference papers, white papers, and reports that were produced by sources not under agreement. We had also hoped that U.S. government-funded journal articles published in sources that generally would not meet ERIC's criteria for regular cataloging would have a way to be included in ERIC. This has not turned out to be the case. Under the updated selection policy, ERIC will no longer accept any journal article through online submission, except from U.S. Department of Education awardees. We believe it is more valuable for our users to have journal articles from sources that have been reviewed and selected for regular cataloging in ERIC. We will continue to accept non-journal content in PDF format for items to review, such as the reports, conference papers, and white papers. And of course, any request to review a journal for regular cataloging in ERIC should be sent to us at ericrequests@ed.gov.
So that was a lot. We want to hear what you think about these proposed changes. We are looking for any feedback that you may have on this selection policy with what we covered today, as well as the written policy that you can find at the link on the screen. Any questions, comments, or concerns would be much appreciated. So please email us any feedback at ericrequests@ed.gov by March 11th. Thank you so much for your time.